all wanted to go to Hogwarts at some point in our life, right? Like, okay, I know a lot of kids die or nearly die there. You know, Neville falls from a great height in his first year, and Ron is almost killed by a giant chess piece in his first year, and Ginny is almost killed by a diary in her first year, and lots of people are almost killed by a snake in that year, and Cedric dies in the Triwizard Tournament, and the list could go on and on and on. But we're not drawn to Hogwarts for the safety, are we? We want to go and learn magic, right? To experience what it's like to be a young witch or wizard in training. So today, I thought I would rank every subject taught at Hogwarts in terms of how cool it is, how interesting it would be, and how much I would like to learn it. Okay, let's start strong then. One of the things that excites me the most about the wizarding world is the magical creatures. Hippogriffs and nifflers and unicorns. Like, sign me the heck up, okay? But also, there are blast-ended scroots and flobberworms, and I guess there are lots of less exciting creatures too, right? But for me, it's worth it, okay? You take the flobberworms if you get to fly on the back of a hippogriff, for sure, right? Would I be excited about Hagrid as a teacher? Well, he seems fun, and he clearly loves his subject, which is half the battle, right? I remember in school you could tell the teachers who had no passion for what they were teaching. But also, Hagrid's not the most responsible, is he? Like, I know Draco makes a meal out of it and blows it all out of proportion to try and get Hagrid fired, but I definitely feel like Hagrid should have had more safety precautions in place when allowing 13-year-olds to come face to face with the creatures who are fierce enough to target the eyes of giants and scratch them out later in the series. But look, I guess I'm just looking for downsides, because Care of Magical Creatures seems pretty perfect. You could tell me I had to stand in a blizzard in my pants for an hour, and if it meant I could then fly on a hippogriff or meet a unicorn, I'd do it, no questions asked. Although it would be inappropriate if a teacher made me do that. Care of Magical Creatures is a god-tier lesson. I once camped out on Dartmoor so that I could look up at the stars without any light pollution or loud traffic or big buildings to like ruin it for me, okay? The stars are amazing. The perspective they give you, like if I'm ever feeling stressed out about anything, a quick glance at the stars sort of reminds me how big the universe is and how my issue is not life or death of all living things. And it's quite calming to have that perspective. That said, I was not great at physics in school, and I feel like the study of stars and planets is most aligned to physics. I'm also not sure, beside the centaurs and how they read the future in the stars, which is kind of more divination than astronomy, like what impact do the stars actually have on magic? You know, why is this relevant to a magic school? I think the phases of the moon impact potion brewing, but besides that, like, is magic more powerful when certain stars align? Are we better at protective charms when Mercury's not in retrograde? I don't really see the significance of astronomy to the study of magic, and I'm not entirely sure that I'd find it that interesting. I think astronomy is like between C or D tier for me, and I think we have to go D tier. Like, the only redeeming factor is that I like looking at stars, and I think having to study them would kind of taint that for me a bit. So I think a lot of people would expect me to say that ancient runes would be boring, okay? But I actually think the use of runes in the wizarding world is one of the most interesting and mysterious parts of magic that we as readers know so little about. Like the pensieve, where they look at the memories, is said to have runes all around the edges of it. The ceiling in the Ministry of Magic has symbols all over it as well, presumably they're runes too. Firenze has them all over the floor in his divination classroom. And when Harry is in the restricted section in his first year, there are books with no words, just symbols, presumably runes. Like, runes are clearly connected to a very old, very powerful, sometimes dark, deep kind of magic. Like, they're not like charms or hexes, right? They're more closely linked to mysterious magic like memories and the future, and that's so cool and interesting. That said, what we hear about the class, it seems like it's mostly translations and learning to read runes, which sounds less fun. So I think the lessons might be boring, but the potential of the class is pretty incredible, right? So we're gonna go B tier for ancient runes. I think this is going to be quite a small section of the video, okay? There is not much in the wizarding world that I would want to do more than fly. Apparate, maybe? And like, magic in general, obviously, as a collective. But learning to fly sounds amazing. Like, if I ever have the superpower talk, flying doesn't have the same appeal to me because I feel like flying as a human would expend energy in the same way that running does, right? And I don't like running. Like, imagine how much energy you'd have to expend to keep your body weight off the ground for a prolonged period of time. It would be a lot. But on a broom, it's like a bike or a car, right? It does all the work for you. You just navigate it. I want to learn to fly so badly. Like, I had a drone a while back, and just seeing things from the sky makes them 100 times more beautiful. But now imagine it's not a drone. You're just flying up there, seeing everything, wind in your hair. Like, look, there are downsides, obviously. The brooms don't look that comfortable. It's not like there's a seat on it or anything. You're just sat on a stick. And there's not like a windscreen or a roof, so the weather can absolutely tear you apart. And let's be honest, the safety precautions suck. Like, you could definitely fall and die quite easily, especially given that you learn to fly at like 11. Like, how often do 11-year-olds fall off their bikes? Falling off brooms would be so much worse. But I don't think any of those things could put me off, okay? I want to fly. I want to soar through the sky and look at mountains and rivers. Flying is god tier for a lesson. Okay, so I feel like we need to remove the Snapification of potions before we assess this, right? Which I know is rich because I didn't remove the Hagridification of Care of Magical Creatures before. But Snape really does put a dampener on things as far as I'm concerned. Like, do I want to be in a class where the teacher threatens to poison a student's toad? Or make fun of another student's teeth when they're insecure about them already? Or constantly try and humiliate certain students and play favourites? No, surprisingly, I do not want to be in that class, okay? But potions without Snape sounds like it would be really quite fun. Like, it feels like the perfect blend between an art and a science, right? Like the science aspect of the ingredients and the measurements, but also the art of it, right? The way that the Half-Blood Prince textbook adjusts instructions and makes tweaks and has shortcuts or roundabout ways of accomplishing things. The way it relies on outside circumstances, like the phases of the moon that we talked about earlier. Now, the closest subject we have in real life is chemistry, and I did not do well in chemistry, folks. So I'm not saying I'd be good at potions, but I do think it would be fun. I think it would be an important skill in the wizarding world, and I do think with an exciting teacher, you could really get into it and love those lessons. Because it truly feels like the possibilities with potion making are endless, right? Luck, truth, love, healing, poison, antidotes, keeping werewolf transformations at bay. Well, not the transformations, just like the brain part. This is incredible stuff, right? I think potions would be an A tier class, so long as it's not with Snape. I have mixed feelings on divination, because in theory, it sounds incredible, right? It's the best lesson ever, the greatest skill you could ever learn. Predicting the future, knowing what's going to happen, giving you an edge over the universe, keeping the chaos of life at bay with premonitions and crystal balls and tea leaves. Except that I largely believe it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work, right? Like, I know there's an argument to be made that every prediction Trelawney made in the series actually came true, but Dumbledore and McGonagall both think of her mostly as a fraud. In fact, McGonagall says that every year, Trelawney predicts one of her students is going to die, and they never do, so clearly not every prediction comes true. The fact is, even if Trelawney isn't a fraud, it seems like you either have the sight or you don't. And if you don't, you're just staring at tea leaves or smoke in a crystal ball aimlessly, right? Like, it's never going to make sense to you. It's like trying to take a class on having freckles. You either have them or you don't. It doesn't seem to be a skill that you can develop over time. And even those who do have the sight, and there's a lot of evidence in the books to suggest that maybe Ron does, nobody seems to have a clue that they do. Ron has no idea that any prediction he's making is actually a premonition. Whether that's about the fact that he predicts that Riddle killed Myrtle, or that he predicts the entirety of the Triwizard Tournament, he's clueless about it all. He's clearly not implementing anything he learned in divination class. So what's the point in studying it? So frankly, I'm with Hermione, right? I think this would be a giant waste of time for me, and as much as I'd love to be able to predict the future, it's never going to happen. This is a D tier class. I understand somebody like Percy Weasley taking Muggle Studies, right? His dad is fascinated by Muggles, despite really knowing very little about them. And it seems that most wizards have no idea how to dress like Muggles or blend in with them. We see evidence of that in the first chapter of The Philosopher's Stone, in the chapter of the Goblet of Fire where everyone arrives at the Quidditch World Cup. Like, nobody can blend in. Which is wild, because the books state that Hogsmeade is the only entirely non-Muggle settlement in Britain, meaning almost all of these other wizards live among muggles. They probably see them daily, interact with them politely, but still have no idea how to dress like them or act like them. And also Ron says in the Chamber of Secrets that half the wizards alive are half-blood or less, because if they didn't marry muggles, they would have died out. So they live among muggles, they marry muggles, and they still can't understand muggles. Do we really think this is going to be a very helpful class? I guess on the flip side, maybe Muggle Studies should be mandatory for almost all students to try and bridge that gap. But people like Hermione and Harry really shouldn't need to study muggles, right? They grew up around them. They see them again every school holiday. Or maybe not every school holiday, just like the summer for Harry, but you get the point, right? Unless this class is where they learn about like Muggle history and stuff, if it's just the study of muggles as people, it's pointless for any Muggleborns or Half-Bloods to really take it, surely. And for me, I have spent decades around Muggles, a long, long time. I feel like I would have no need for this class whatsoever. I'd just be sat there when I could be in another class, twiddling my thumbs, being frustrated I'm not actually doing any magic. For me, this is an F-tier class. Now we're on to Harry Potter's favourite subject, Defense Against the Dark Arts, right? So off the bat, my first reaction is, Defense Against the Dark Arts implies the existence of dark arts, right? And I don't love the necessity of that. Like, I'm just put off by the fact that I'm learning to defend myself against something that might bring me harm. But I guess that's the importance of it, right? It's like a self-defense class. If we really get into the nitty-gritty of the more prominent lessons that Harry has in this subject, the ones we read about in more detail, it honestly doesn't fill me with that much excitement to take the class. Like, just think about some of those classes. The Pixies that Lockhart releases. The Boggart class sounded kind of fun until you realise that you're being asked to reveal your deepest, darkest fear, your biggest insecurity, to all of your classmates, including any class bullies who may be present and may take that fear and use it against you on, I don't know, the Quidditch pitch, for example. Like what happens with Harry and the Dementors when Draco and the other Slytherins dress up as Dementors mid-Quidditch game. Then there's the class in which all of the students are either forced to witness or subjected to unforgivable curses. And there's the year where they did nothing under Umbridge. And then the year where they were taught by that teacher who likes to bully them, right? We've talked about the Snapification of classes already. Like, this track record doesn't scream a lesson I want to be in line for. Like, don't get me wrong, the idea of learning things like Stupefy or Bombarda or Expelliarmus, like, I know they learn some of these in Dueling Club, but I imagine it would be covered in Defense Against the Dark Arts too. They do sound fun, but also, what's the practical use of them? If I'm not actively in a war like they are in Harry Potter, and believe me, I very much intend to never actively be in a war, when am I ever going to use Bombarda? I don't ever want to be in contact with Dementors, so I don't really feel the need to learn to produce a Patronus. Like, I know it can be handy for things like sending messages, but like, these people can apparate or use the flu network, so just do that and tell people directly. There is one redeeming thing about Defense Against the Dark Arts that I think would be useful, and that's in 6th year they learn to do spells without speaking the incantations. But I think mostly everything that I would like about Defense Against the Dark Arts would actually be Charms class, right? So for me, Defense Against the Dark Arts has to go in C tier. Like, it could have been B, like, based on the fun that you'd probably have in certain lessons, but mostly in terms of practical use and stuff, it's a C tier class. Plants. It doesn't scream to me that this class will fulfill all of my wizarding dreams, right? Like, I can tell you for sure, I am not a keen gardener. I once poured a litre of water into a plant pot without realising there were holes in the bottom, and the plant pot was inside in my living room. Every houseplant that I have is dead. Like, look at them. Plus, I don't really like outdoor things, okay? Bugs, plants, weeds, just not for me. So I wouldn't be good at Herbology, I wouldn't enjoy Herbology, I don't think Herbology would be that useful to me. Like, it would be indirectly, right? I'm sure if I needed medicine or anything like that, then definitely it would be important. But in general, I wouldn't ever want to find myself in those greenhouses with those creepy plants that Slughorn snips off to take leaves from and sell them. Like, those vines reminded me of spiders' legs, and I don't want it. For me, this is an F tier class. Okay, on paper, I love the sound of Transfiguration, right? The idea that I could turn one thing into another, or even transfigure myself like they do in their classes in later years. Like, you can't turn yourself entirely into something else, it's not Polyjuice Potion, but like change your hair length or colour or something like that. They also learn the Vanishing spell, which sounds cool in Transfiguration. However, it does feel like a lot of what they actually learn, again, seems pointless. Like, they turn animals into jugs of water and teacups. Like, I'm sorry, I don't ever want to drink from something that was once an animal, okay? I love animals, but they're not known for being terribly hygienic in general. So when we actually read about Transfiguration classes in the books, it does kind of feel like a bit of a gimmick class. But, and there's a big but, Hermione mentions that there are exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration, one of which is food, right? Food cannot be created out of nothing, but once it's there, it can be enlarged or multiplied. And that is definitely a transfiguration skill that I would like. Plus, if food is one of only 5 exceptions to the rule, that suggests that many things can in fact be conjured out of nothing. So overall, Transfiguration for me teeters between A and B tier. Like, the actual classes, as we hear Harry's perspective on them, are kind of meh, but the potential of what you could learn in that subject really pushes it on, right? So I think Transfiguration has to go in A tier. Now, I know that Apparition isn't strictly speaking a lesson, right? But since I included flying, I thought I'd include this. And this really doesn't need much discussion, does it? The ability to teleport, I want it. It's as simple as that. Like, there is the downside of splinching, right, which is a fairly significant one. Ron gets pretty seriously injured from being splinched at one point. But if it's anything like driving, and it sounds very similar, right? The way they have to have lessons, they have to get a license by passing a test, you have to be 17 to do it. It all sounds very much like driving here in the UK. And that makes me feel like, as somebody who takes great care to be a careful driver, I'd be a good and careful apparator as well. So apparating is God tier for me. History of magic feels like the opposite of Muggle Studies to me. Like, where purebloods might want to learn about boring Muggle stuff that I just take for granted, I would love to learn all about the history of the wizarding world. Now, don't get me wrong, as I've said before, passionate teachers are a must, so I would want a more enthusiastic teacher than Professor Binns, but given that dying didn't even get him replaced by another teacher, I'm not sure anybody else will ever teach that subject for the rest of time. But if you give me a dynamic, compelling teacher to teach me about goblin rebellions and about the witch trials and like the founding of Hogwarts and the history of the Ministry and ancient battles between wizards and witches or muggles, political struggles and the beginning of the wizarding world. Oh my god, I just want a wizarding version of Hamilton. I've just realised that's what I'm describing and that sounds incredible. Anyway, if those criteria were met, this could be an excellent subject. The only downside, again, you're sat in a classroom studying rather than actually doing something practical, actually waving a wand and doing magic, which is enough to bring it down from God tier to A tier, I think. But it is a very solid A tier lesson. Wizarding maths. No part of this subject, at any point in the series, ever sounds compelling. To be fair, it is very rarely mentioned in any great detail. Like, I think the extended lore of Harry Potter, in theory, numbers are supposed to have magical properties that can help predict the future. Like, I know there's talk about the number 7 being important, that's why Voldemort wanted 7 Horcruxes. In which case, it kind of feels a bit like the 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42 from Lost, which has much more interest for me. But largely, the study of numbers in a magical school is feeling like a much worse version of ancient runes. Like, imagine this, right? You can study this ancient Celtic symbol and the deep magical properties it bestows upon the item that it's inscribed upon. Or you can look at this number 2 for a while. Which one would you rather? Arithmancy, I'm sorry, it's an F tier subject, okay? So earlier on, I alluded to the fact that charms is actually going to be everything that I think most people would expect or hope Defense Against the Dark Arts to be. Like, this is actual practical magic that you can use every day. Like, you're learning things that will make a genuine difference to your life. You'd learn Scourgify here, right? The cleaning charm. Accio, the summoning charm. I imagine there's some crossover with Defense Against the Dark Arts in some places, but given it's called a shield charm, I imagine you'd learn that in charms class too. And probably all the other protective enchantments that Hermione uses on the Horcrux hunt, right? Maybe even the Fidelius charm as well. And then there's like Wingardium Leviosa and probably Incendio and Aguamenti. Just, charms feels like it would be the most fun, the most lighthearted, and the area of magic that would most make a difference in my life. So this is God tier. This would be, outside of practical skills like flying and apparating, this would be my favourite class at Hogwarts if I were ever to have gone. And if you like listening to me rank things from the Harry Potter world, you might like this video, where I rank the books themselves. And my least favourite book riled up some people in the comments, so you might want to check that one out next.